In relation to pensions, it was obvious that the numbers of people who were relying on state pension was rising. Your traditional defined benefit pensions were declining. People were living longer, more healthily, and the younger generations were going to have to start paying more and more for the older generations, so there were obvious challenges in pensions around cost and sustainability. I was determined not to end up with large-scale welfare commitments that ended up with large-scale taxation commitments.
The idea was we're going to do a green paper looking particularly at private sector pension provision. The one thing we managed to get into the green paper was the Commission for Turner, and this was also this is the sort of the last-minute brokering, and it really was while we're at the printers.
I can't remember where the initial phone call came from, but I think it was a combination of Number 10 and the DWP, which was then run by Andrew Smith. I remember having a meeting with Andrew Smith to talk about the details of it, but I think it was always clear that this was something that the Prime Minister wanted to happen.
I have to say, I rather assumed that there would be quite a number of people on it. It was only during the conversation that I realised that there would only be 3 of us and there would be no chance to hide in the corner. It actually worked very well as being a small commission. I mean, it meant that we worked very closely together on every piece of evidence, all the material we looked at, of which there was an enormous amount, and agreed word by word and line by line with everything that was in the report.
It was a good group of people. I mean, it brought different skill sets. You had Adair's ability to articulate the issue. I mean, his communication skills were pretty key in building the consensus, and his strategic ability to kind of see the challenge and to map the issues. Then you had John with his brilliant welfare economist skills. And I had the kind of practical experience of dealing with employers and what would run and what wouldn't.
We were quite, I guess, uncertain as to what the Commission would actually look at because the terms of reference were initially very strongly focused around kind of voluntary saving versus compulsory saving, and we weren't sure that was the right question to look at.
And then a few months in, Adair gives this interview. I mean, happily, luckily enough for me, but I talked to him and I said, so what are you going to do? Nice open question. He didn't stop talking for 40 minutes. And we're going to do this, and this. We're going to look at that, and that, and that. I got the end of that. I said, but you've just rewritten your terms of reference. And he says, well, you can't just look at the private sector without looking at its interaction with the state, I'm afraid. So we're going to do that.
Adair had the trust of the media. Nobody thought that Adair's job was to simply be given a report by a bunch of civil servants and put his name on it. He had absolute credibility.
It was also very clear to me personally that in order to address that problem, it was important that there was something or somebody independent who could really address the key issues and take the politics, if you like, out of pensions.
One of the interesting things, the reason for consensus building was because it was a sort of policy where everyone had to contribute something, or you could say everyone lost something. I mean, employers had to face the prospect of compulsory contributions to auto-enrolment.
To your point on political consensus, it was a genuine consensus. I mean, I still think it's one of the most remarkable things. And I think the industry by that time had worked out that its narrative had to be about the policy as well as the industry's part in it.
You don't build a consensus simply by splitting every argument down the middle. You have to actively look at what the real concerns of interest of each player is and make sure they get as much of that as possible. What you could say perhaps was the TUC was brave not to attack the whole Pensions Commission report because it disagreed with the state pension age.
Something like national pensions day, a national deliberative event or process is absolutely necessary, because it's the only way you can get a legitimate consensus. A consensus is based on what the citizenry think and is based on information.
Because of the politics of the period and Labour's dominance at that period, that there was a shift to the centre or the centre left. And so at that point, Conservatives, Liberal Democrats, were quite keen to share the same ground.
I think there was a real political imperative. The pressure, particularly from 2000 onwards, to restore the link was something that was almost irresistible, and I'd argued in favour of it, as it happens.
It was one of those exercises, this was my view anyway, that the whole thing hung together. Take it apart, it fell apart. And fortunately, government was able to come to a common position on this. It was difficult, but we got there in the end.
I think it was important to build a consensus by showing that there were in certain areas we would have universal benefits. We would not simply have everything means tested, but if we wanted to get to the heart of pensioner poverty, we had to do something different, like the pension credit. We were not in a position, we thought, for some time to relink pensions to earnings simply because of the cost of doing that. But obviously we wanted to do it if it was at all possible. What made it possible was an understanding that as the pension age changed and we had made the pension credit work, and actually because earnings and inflation were not rising in the same way that they did in the past, that it was possible to afford this.
Not only is it very effective, in fact so effective that one of the arguments we were having after the 2010 administration is the department underestimating how effective it would be.
There were times when we were developing the programme where the future of the programme looked quite shaky. Automatic enrolment was going to add to red tape, so there were attempts to look at whether it really should go ahead.
So in PADA it was, let's design, procure and start to build this brilliant pension plan. And in NEST it was, we've got this brilliant pension plan, we've now got to launch it and grow it and not fall over in a heap, and everything's got to work and people have got to like it, all those kinds of, objectives.
The government decided that they wouldn't have a default scheme, but we will give NEST a public service obligation. It must accept you, it cannot turn you away, it has to be there for you. Doesn't matter whether your business is economic or not, doesn't even matter whether you turn up at the last minute. One day before you're due to be auto-enrolled, NEST has to be there for you. And that was the challenge that we faced in building NEST.
So you had the good fortune that Steve, who was aware of the history, comes in as the pensions minister. And insofar as I could in cabinet, I would always speak up for this and would say to George Osborne, with whom I got on, this was a very sensible reform, we should stick with it.
I took the view that I wanted future pension provision to be a twin-track approach, the state doing what it does best and doing it simply and properly, getting everyone to the starting line, the state facilitating second-tier provision, but then the market having competition, real investment returns, and crucially, a funded second tier that I own, that I have property rights over. So in a sense, I'm slightly insulated against the whims of tomorrow's taxpayers by my private pot, but I'm insulated against the ups and downs of the economy by my state pot. And I think that's probably the right mix.
Steve Webb's construction of the new state pension, reflected a strain of liberal thought, which has been very which we find pretty consistently in British pensions, and going right back to Beveridge. I applaud Webb for making the system simpler, and I think that was the right thing to do. But let's not kid ourselves, it's not generous. It's very minimalist, and it only makes sense with top-up provision. And therein lies the problem, that we don't have 100% top-up.
So this is a piece absolutely of path dependency, that Britain in the 1950s went down one road. We tried to divert, and in the end we came back to the original Beveridgean road, but maybe with some additional enhancements that make it rather better suited for the modern world.
As a member of the Commission, I was clearly saying, well, we have to have a solution that works for women. If it doesn't work for women, it's not going to work. The evidence itself and the fact that there were people insisting that any solution that comes out of the Commission needs to address the gender dimension, it had a good wind. And it was a good opportunity not to be missed.
I think the big challenge is the self-employed. and in particular with the proliferation of 0 hours contracts, the self-employed, the gig economy. We always knew that that was a problem. So I think we really have to return to how do we deal with that? How do we make sure that those people, and that needs more thought.
Now, pensions reform, I think, is one of the things that we did in the right way and pretty much with the right result. And I think it does give you quite a good clue as to how you do these future reforms.